The more people I talk to about anxiety, I realize that there's this preconceived notion that if we just understand why we're anxious, it makes it stop. Now, I don't know about you, but trying to use logic to talk my body out of a panic attack was like trying to use a hammer to put out a forest fire. And if it works for some people, that's really phenomenal. I can't speak for everyone. You might be told to breathe through it, to reframe it, challenge the thought, maybe even ask yourself if the fear is rational. And here's the thing. You probably can. You're smart. You know that the fear doesn't always make sense. You can maybe even articulate in full sentences exactly why you shouldn't be this anxious right now. And maybe your body just still does not care. The gap between what you know and what you feel is not a character flaw. It's a neuroscience problem. And once you understand what's actually happening in there, the strategy on how to address it, I believe, completely changes. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So about 10 years ago, I was homebound for weeks. And not because of a physical injury, not because of an illness that anyone could see. I could not leave my apartment for days because just the idea of taking a bus triggered a complete nervous system shutdown for me. And it wasn't the bus itself, nothing had ever happened to me on there, but just even the idea of being on the bus. Now, this was one of many everyday things that were triggering me. And the truly disorienting part of that experience was that I knew it didn't make sense. I wasn't confused about that. My ability to reason was there. I could hold a 10 out of 10 coherent conversation about how irrational this was. I could explain logically and name every reason why the bus was not actually a threat. But my nervous system was operating at a zero. Those two things coexisted: fully cognitive function and a complete physiological shutdown. And I think that tells us something important. Where the thinking brain and the survival brain, to put it simply, are not the same system. They were running separate programs. And I'm telling you this because the contrast with my life today is almost surreal to me. I don't think about transportation. I just don't think about it. It doesn't register. It's not important to me besides logistics. That version of my life, the homebound, days in bed, a bus triggering a panic attack, feels so foreign to me that I sometimes have to remind myself that it was real and I've experienced such a big shift. And that shift did not happen because I reasoned my way out of it and forced myself into the situation. It happened because I found a way to work at the level where the problem and anxiety actually lived. To understand why logic fails anxiety, we need a quick map of what's actually happening in the brain. We have a prefrontal cortex. That's the part that's doing the reasoning right now as you watch this video. It handles language, logic, planning, and conscious thought. It's what lets you say, I know this is not rational. And then you have the limbic system. It's specifically, we're referring to the amygdala in this case, which is your brain's threat detection center. And evolutionarily, it has one job, and it is to keep you alive. It does not weigh evidence, it pattern matches. When it detects something it has learned to associate with danger and survival, even if that thing is just a thought, just a memory, or just the idea of a bus, it fires. The amygdala's stress response fires in milliseconds. Relatively, the prefrontal cortex takes much longer to actually come online. So by the time that you're consciously aware that you're actually anxious, by the time you're reaching for a coping thought or activity, the body is already in full activation. Your cortisol is releasing, your heart rate is up, the system is running. And now you're trying to send a logical message from the prefrontal cortex to a system that doesn't receive that signal. It's probably saying something like, I have no interest in listening to you. That thing over there is trying to attack me. We are in crisis mode. We don't have time for introspection and logic. And that is not a strategy problem. That's an architecture problem. Now, from my humble observation and experience, here's why I think most people stay stuck. They think that they're self-sabotaging when they are actually just overprotected. Your brain is not broken. It is not working against you or trying to keep you miserable. It is working for you using an outdated survival map. And at some point, through stress, through overwhelm, through something that the nervous system registered as threatening, your amygdala learned that this kind of situation is dangerous. Protect. And it has been doing just that, exactly that, faithfully and efficiently ever since. The problem is not the protection. The problem is that the map is old. The threat that it was designed for may no longer actually exist. But the system doesn't know that because no one ever gave it updated information, at least not in a way or language that it can receive or understand. And this is why I think positive affirmations don't resolve anxiety. I do think they can make you feel better. This is why understanding your triggers doesn't eliminate them on its own. And this is why you can spend years in talk therapy developing extraordinary insight into your patterns, and the patterns still fire. It's not because that form of therapy doesn't work or didn't help. It's because insight and pattern updating are different processes running in different systems. To update the map, you have to speak the amygdala's language. And that language is not logic. It's sensation. It's body-based. It's what neuroscientists call bottom-up processing. Now, top-down processing is what most therapeutic and wellness interventions use. You start in the thinking brain with language, with analysis, with reframing, and then you try to send that effect downward into the emotional and physiological systems. Cognitive behavioral therapy, journaling, positive affirmations, focused meditation, even a lot of mindfulness-based approaches are all top-down in their primary mechanism. And to be clear, top-down interventions do work. They can be phenomenal. They are genuinely useful for a wide range of things. I also like to experiment with that. They build self-awareness. They develop metacognitive skills. They help people create coherent narratives around their experiences. Where I think that sometimes they can have limits is in trying to modify conditioned physiological responses in the amygdala, or where I don't want to spend that much time trying to analyze everything. Because some of my physiological responses were not written by the thinking brain. They were written by experience, by sensation, by what the body lived through. And they need to be rewritten the same way. So bottom-up processing works in the opposite direction. Instead of starting in the thinking brain and trying to push downward, you start in the body with sensation, with physical input, with a sensory experience. And you allow that to move upward, influencing the limbic system and eventually the cortex. This is the pathway the amygdala actually responds to really well. It's the language the survival brain understands. Somatic therapies, EMDR, certain breathwork protocols, and EFT tapping, my favorite, all work primarily through bottom-up mechanisms. They introduce physical input while the nervous system is in a particular state, creating this direct physiological experience rather than a cognitive one. EFT is what changed my life. And here's what makes it particularly interesting. It doesn't choose one pathway. It uses both simultaneously. And that dual engagement is not accidental. It is the mechanism. When you do EFT or tapping, you start by identifying what you're working with. Whether it be a specific thought, a memory, sensation, or fear, you name it. You bring it into your conscious awareness. You rate its intensity. This is the top-down component. You're using the thinking brain to locate and open the target. Think of it like pulling up a file on a computer. The cognitive work opens the neural file. It activates the memory or the fear response so it is present and accessible for you. The amygdala is now running its associated pattern. Then, while that pattern is active, while the amygdala is lit up, you begin the tapping on specific acupressure points. And this is the bottom-up component. The tapping sends a calming physical signal directly to your limbic system. And you're not doing this through language, logic, or reason. You're doing this through sensation, through the body's own nervous pathways. The amygdala receives two simultaneous inputs. The activated pattern, which is the file we referred to earlier, that has the learned association with threat. And then you have a direct physical signal that the body is calm, not in danger, but safe. Over time and with repetition, this pairing updates the association. The file gets rewritten. The same content that used to trigger the survival response now passes through without activating it. Not because you've convinced yourself it's fine, but because the system has a new physiological record of experiencing that content while the body was safe. Just to be clear, for me, the memory of the bus or being bedridden has not been deleted from my mind. The emotional charge is decoupled from the narrative memory. I can't resonate emotionally with what I was experiencing anymore. I still remember the bus, the days at home, the cognitive reasoning that I was trying to do to make myself feel better. But thinking about that time or even about the bus doesn't make my heart race anymore. The idea of walking down the street and planning around a bus schedule doesn't trigger some kind of fear. It's just neutral for me. Now, EFT has allowed me to reach a neutral state, not just about getting on a bus, but even significant trauma that I have been through. That was just the best example that I could give to you because it was pretty life-altering. The technical term for what's happening here is somatic memory reconsolidation. Say that fast 3 times. Based on the work of researchers like Dr. Karim Nader, memory reconsolidation is a well-established phenomenon in neuroscience. When a memory is retrieved and held in an active state, it becomes temporarily malleable. It can be updated. The brain has a narrow window during that retrieval period where new information can be integrated into the stored record. Traditional exposure therapy uses this window cognitively. Retrieve the memory, introduce new cognitive information, and then update the record. EFT uses this window somatically. Retrieve the memory or activated stress pattern, introduce a new physical experience of calm while it's active, and 3, update the record at the body level. If you've been working at the thinking layer and not getting the results you needed at the body layer, with your body experience, you are not failing. You've been using a real tool, perhaps just on the wrong part of the problem or experience. The thinking brain is not the enemy. No part of you is. It's essential to EFT. It's what opens the file and chooses to improve it. What's missing might be the other half of the equation, the bottom-up signal that tells the nervous system that the file can be updated. That's what EFT provides, not as a magic fix, not as a shortcut, as a precise, repeatable technique that works at both layers simultaneously, opening the target cognitively, rewiring it somatically. EFT is how you change the environment your nervous system is reading, not by arguing with the alarm, but by going to the source. This is why EFT can produce changes that feel different from insight-based approaches, why people describe memories losing their charge, or triggers that used to send them into shutdown simply just not registering anymore. It's not repression. It is not avoidance. It is not toxic positivity. The memory is still there. The physiological response attached to it has just been updated. And that's what happened with the bus. It's what happened with my trauma. I haven't forgotten it. I just don't feel anything negative about it. And naturally, I just don't think about it as much. The physiological association that bus equals threat and that my body has to flare up to alert me of danger has been rewritten. I am free. And now it's just a bus. Hi, I'm Sonia, and if I can change my life with EFT, I sure as hell believe you can too.